Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started, and excited to see a nice group here, and really appreciate the opportunity. So as we were kind of debriefing on last year's CFO Summit, one of the main comments that came back of things that you all said you wanted to see more of and have a little bit more content around is kind of CFO of the future. And so we're really excited about that, and especially as we had a chance this morning to have the economic future unrolled for us a little bit and unpacked by Steve Olson. Now we're going to take some of that and kind of roll that into your role and the things that you guys are going to be looking at over the coming months and years. And just very excited to have the panel as we looked at who the right people is to do this. Obviously, we want people that have been through a few rounds of this and done this a couple of times before and seen some success and really seen some great change in what they're doing. So excited for the panel and very much welcome them. Gary Bowen with Cotopaxi, Patrick Ord, the Studio McGee, has been a CFO and still I think identifies as a CFO, but currently the president there. And then Nate Brown with Hello Bello. And maybe just to give a little bit of context, I wanted to start out and give them an opportunity to, just for introduction, a little bit of the path that got them to where they are. Maybe just start with Gary and run away that way.
Okay, can you hear? What's that? Okay, good. Yeah, Gary Bowen. I've had a fair amount of product experience and SaaS experience, so I really got my first role as CFO at OGO a number of years ago, and I just kind of fell into it. The president said, "Hey, we need a new CFO. You can do it." I'm like, "Okay," and that's how I ended up in that. After they also gave me a bunch of other stuff to do, but anyway, just been, like Reed said, around the block a few times, and Reed's been auditing my work for a really long time, which has also been good. And been at Cotopaxi for 4 years, another, fast-growing rocket ship. It's been a lot of fun. That's kind of where I am right now.
Great.
Patrick Ord, as Reed mentioned, I'm currently serving as president of Studio McGee. Started as actually a fractional CFO with them for a year. And that responsibility led to more responsibility, and so I've been president for the past 2 years. It's been a really fun business. We have a number of businesses. We have a licensing business, a deal with Target, a couple others that we'll be announcing soon. We have a media business. We have a Netflix show, Dream Home Makeover, that we were nominated for Emmys for the past 2 years on. That's been kind of fun. And within that business, we've got a relationship with HarperCollins, and our founders, Sid and Shay, have a best-selling New York Times bestseller. We have an e-commerce business, which actually comprises about 85% of our revenue. And we started as a design company. The founder's story is really interesting in that Shay McGee started designing in a spare bedroom and taking pictures of her designs, posting them on Instagram, and she gained a following. That following led to paid work, which she thought was remarkable. She never thought people would pay her to actually have her design homes. And then her husband, Sid, left where he was working. He wasn't really excited about his job opportunity and came to the company, and then he started a product side of it and e-commerce. And so we've had some fun growth, and yeah, it's been really interesting. My background, I've been a CFO, I've been president of company, I've been in consulting, so I've kind of worn different hats. But yeah, so I still do speak CFO, so that qualifies me to be here, I think.
Well, the nice thing too is you're spending some time now on kind of the other side of the fence and getting a feel for maybe a different perspective. And I know Gary, for a period of time, you sat on that side of the fence as well. But anyway, so look forward to your insight. Nate?
Yeah, I've had a chance to be a CFO for a few different companies. Prior to Hello Bello, I was at a company called Zarby's Naturals, which kind of came from Utah. And we ended up selling that business to Johnson & Johnson, and that was a fun experience. Prior to that, I was a CFO of some network marketing companies and have had various experience there. But my current company is a company called Hello Bello. It's a company that was founded by Dax Shepard and Kristen Bell. It's an e-commerce business as well as a CPG business. We have about 50% of our sales are subscription, a monthly diaper subscription, kids products, so body wash, body lotion, we're talking sunscreen, all those kinds of things. And then we have these a few pretty big partners, Walmart being one of them, Walmart, Target, CVS, Walgreens. So we're, 150,000 monthly subscribers and about 30,000 stores across the country. And then just recently we decided that to be competitive, we would vertically integrate. And so we stood up a manufacturing facility in Waco, Texas, to try and manufacture in the U.S. And really kind of control our destiny, at least on diapers. And that facility is up and running and now produces annually about 650 million diapers. So kind of an interesting business, and that's our 4th year.
Okay.
So of the business.
Excellent. So thanks for that insight and kind of that background. I think that'll make the discussion a little bit more meaningful. We want to have kind of an open dialogue as well. And so as we're going, if you have questions, feel free to participate or throw those out. I've got a few ideas of directions we can head, but we're happy to pivot. They're very flexible guys. And so maybe just to kick things off, and I'd love to really get down the road into growth-minded CFOs and getting out of the numbers, but really want to just start with a baseline. As you all have come into new opportunities, new companies, and where do you see kind of baseline starting point to get yourself a platform from where to go? What have you seen and what's your experience with kind of getting that baseline in place so that you can really grow and expand out?
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, I think just for me, most of the opportunities I've walked into needed a lot of work and cleanup initially. That's often the case when you're with entrepreneurial people who start up. They are really great at coming up with the brands, the concepts, and so forth, but don't think so much about the back end. You actually don't really want them doing that because they're good at the other things, right? And so then coming in, you just have to start to put discipline on the organization and get things great. You got to make sure you got great data so you can make good decisions and support the growth, and you got to make sure you have great team members. So interestingly enough, Rich Doxey's here. He was with me for almost 5 years. Well, the whole time I was there, and now he works for Patrick. Yeah, Patrick's like stealing our employees now. I'm just kidding you. But anyway, but it's a great opportunity for Rich. But having somebody like Rich on your team, and Cole Dixon, who's our FP&A director, is here as well. And just you have great people, and then you can come in, you can make a big difference in a short period of time. Because lots of times companies are writing manual checks and they don't have automated ways of doing things, and there's low-hanging fruit. You can come in and you just start making changes, and then you really start to go upstream. So I was in operations for a long time before I actually became a CFO, and so that's helped me a lot to where I understand how distribution works and sales and marketing and customer service and IT, because I've managed all those functions, and so it's easy for me to go out and say, okay, what do we need to do here? And then for me also, it's establishing this culture within the finance team that we're not the department of no, we're the department of grow. And so obviously we have to maintain controls and stick within budgets and have accountabilities that way, but you work hard to funnel the dollars to where you're going to grow the business, if it's product development or branding or marketing, or you need operational infrastructure. So you just pay attention to that stuff and focus on the things that are going to really help you grow. And then that in turn helps you as a finance leader, because if you're growing, you tend to have more resources, and it's easier to get better lines of credit, and it enables a lot of things if you're focused on growing and eliminating the activities and funding activities that really aren't supporting growth.
That's a great answer. Yeah, so I guess in thinking about my career, I've kind of, I've spent a decent amount of time in consulting between opportunities, and what I've liked about that is it's allowed me to get in and look at different business models, see things that I'm kind of excited about. And as I was consulting as a fractional CFO, I got in contact with Sid and Shay McGee, and this was 3 years ago. Well, I actually met them 4 years ago. And learning about their business model was fascinating to me. It's, you know, this whole, and I'm sure Nate can comment on this because he's got celebrity founders as well, but this whole personality-led economy, you know, this whole personality-led business plan where you just have this outsized demand, you know, our Instagram following was large, and so from a demand side, it was a really exciting business. But when you start to look behind the curtain, there, you know, the brand had more recognition than the operational competency. And so as I got involved with this business, I thought, okay, these are problems that I would love to solve. You know, the demand problem's a really hard problem to solve, you know, if you have a business that can't generate demand. But I got excited about Studio McGee because I just saw that we were running as fast as we could to keep up. And so I thought, okay, you know, we can do this. And as I dove into their financials, you know, as CFOs, you guys, you know, can appreciate they were a mess. You know, they were on cash basis accounting. And Sid looked at me and he said, "Are we making money?" And I said, "I don't know what your margins are. You know, some days, some months they're 10%, the other months they're 90%. They're just like this." I said, "We need to get on an accrual basis accounting system. You know, and once we do that, we can start forecasting with certainty." And so, you know, just kind of digging in, you know, starts to make all the difference. But I think that, you know, when you think of like the skills that each of us have from an accounting perspective, a CFO perspective, you know, just establishing, you know, just really good, you know, books and accounting, getting good visibility, then you could start to create forecasts with more certainty. And then you can, when you have that, you can start to attract capital. And as Gary was saying, once you're growing, things becomes more easier because, you know, capital tends to come to you. And so, I don't know, those are just some thoughts.
Yep. Both of these guys have given some great thoughts. One of the things I would just add to what Gary was saying is if you're a CFO or FP&A or controller or whatever your function is in the company, and you haven't talked to your marketing team about what they calculate as return on ad spend, I'm going to say that because that's a real thing. There is a return on ad spend. And often accountants kind of look and say, wow, that can't be real, right? And what are those impressions for, and how do you convert those to cash? But I would suggest if you guys could spend some time with your marketing folks, spend some time with your product development folks, and listen to how they think, you can take good accounting data once you get it, as Gary and Patrick have said here, and you can actually help them be more powerful. You can tell them what their margin is and what that product margin is each time they sell it. You can tell them, hey, you know what, that ad actually generated this much revenue. Oftentimes, CFOs and accountants, they go to the meeting and they look at the marketing budget or they look at the spend and they go, wow, that's a lot. You know, I think my marketing team gets blown away because I usually say at the very end of the meeting, if money was no object, what would we spend next month that's not on the plan? And we talk a little bit about far-reaching ideas, and then we say, is that something we should put on our strat plan and try and fund next year? And those are powerful moments that accountants and CFOs can have, that you probably, it's not about closing the books and it's not about that. It's really about partnering with the rest of the company and helping them make better decisions.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point, because marketing people, good marketing people, know the metrics of their business. And I've worked with marketing people who would say, well, you can't measure marketing. I just got to do whatever I got to do. And I'm like, no, you can measure, and good marketing people are really good at it, like
Yeah.
Nate was. And I also love this question that he just asked too, because I like to ask, well, if there were no constraints, what would we do? Because it starts creative thinking, right? And I related to that, I have a quick question though. Like, I like to do unbalanced budgeting, like not say, okay, we got a new year coming up, everybody gets 5% more or whatever. I don't like the peanut butter spread. What do you guys do? I'd rather like have some group like this year, okay, you don't get any increase, and you guys get 20 because it's really going to drive the business. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, there's twofold. One is obviously you kind of have to start with a baseline, but in challenging all of that, we take our product innovation map and our strategy map and say, how would that affect our budget before we even start? And then we get the team together and say, guess what? If we really invest on this strategic item, we may not have increases in a lot of these departments. Are you guys on board with that? Because if you don't get consensus, and consensus in a good way, you're going to get kind of undone while you start executing. And so we do it both ways. We take, historical budgeting's bad. You should do zero budgeting on some, for sure. But if it doesn't overlay on your product development and your strategic map, I don't know, it's hard, then it's just a numbers game at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a timely question. We're just preparing for a strategy offsite a week from this Monday, and we're in the way that typically what we've done is we've gone by department and said, okay, marketing, tell us what you want to do this year. Okay, let's go to operations. What do you guys want to do this year? And it's a very passive experience where there's a lot of slide deck presentations. And so we're changing it up this year, and we're going by topics. And we're starting to ask questions, and we're all going to get around a table, and the founders are going to be there. And we want everybody leaving knowing that there's an authoritative answer to this kind of stuff. Because too often, you have a strategy session at the beginning of the year, and then throughout the year there's confusion. And I've got all our heads of departments reporting into me, and they'll be saying like, I want to do this, but that person isn't on board with it. And so this is the time to like straighten all that out, right? And so we have a bunch of topics that we're going to talk about, our product strategy, our web strategy, all that kind of stuff, and make sure that we hear from all the departments, all the inputs, and then that's going to help to determine what strategic initiatives we're going to chase next year, and then how we'll support them from a budget perspective. But yeah, it's much more dynamic, I think, in kind of these, I don't know if we would be startups, probably more scale-up phases, but to like rethink budgets every year, because sometimes there's this psychology in departments where they feel like growing head count makes them more important. And, and that's, you're just like, okay, everybody's trying to create their own fiefdom here, and you really have to resist that. And it all has to be driven through initiatives that are aligned with key growth initiatives of the company.
Yeah, and really push your people
Right.
on why do you need that many more people? Like, is it because we don't have good process, or do we need to fix the process? What are people doing that require that? Because if it's not adding value, right, you still want to take those resources and push them towards product development or marketing or, other things that are going to really drive the business.
And so Gary, you mentioned something early on, and I think, and then Nate brought it up a little bit later, but just, I was talking to my brother, and he's an engineer for ATK, and I was asking him, what does it take to be a good CFO? And he said word for word, he's like, all you have to do is say no every single time. and that Gary's response kind of brought that back to me a little bit, but I liked, both of you talked a little bit about getting in outside the numbers and understanding some of the other groups within the organization, product development, sales and marketing, and really understanding how they operate and what they're doing. But maybe what experiences have you had, I guess successes and failures in understanding what they need and how that helps you to be an agent for growth within the company and not just the chief no officer.
Yeah, I actually did that as a Halloween costume one time. I came in as the CF no, and People thought that was funny, but I think, so the mistakes I made in the past were, there are a couple things, especially when I was early on at OGO. I used to get frustrated that the founder didn't care about the financials. Like, he didn't want to know about them like I did. And I would say, don't you want to go over? He says, nope, you got that. And it took me a while to understand, like, all he wanted to do was design product all the time. And I realized I want him to design product all the time, because he's going to come up with cool stuff that's going to make money. So why shackle him with some of this other stuff? If I can give him summary information that he knows everything's okay and he's got money to do what he wants to do, that's good. And also, saying no just ticks people off all the time. And so it's not like, you don't want the organization to be mad at you all the time. So instead of just saying no, you say, well, help me understand what your needs are there and how does this fit into the strategic plan? Like, you can just frame it up a different way. And you still know, like, in your head, all right, I've got these constraints I got to work within. But like, at Cotopaxi, we have the same issue. We've got big Instagram following with Davis, the founder, and he's always thinking big things. And he'll just show up to me and said, Gary, we just need to hire a chief people officer. And inside I'm going, oh my gosh, like we're not big enough for that. Why do you want to do that right now? But I just catch myself and say, no, don't think that way. Just help understand, like, okay, what's important to you about this right now? Where do you see us going? And it actually helps me think about things better, because it's, you just kind of open your mind. And it kind of comes back to that question that Dave was saying, like, okay, if resources, money wasn't a constraint anywhere, what would we do? And sometimes you'll get to that same answer, like, actually, I'd probably do the same thing, so let's go find a way to make that happen, right? And so just having, it's way more fun to do that too, just to sit there and say, all right, let's talk about that, let's figure that out. Okay, we can't do that right now, maybe we could do it next quarter or next year or whatever, and you have conversations about it. And then everybody views finance like, oh, they're on my side, they want me to win, they're not just telling me no all the time.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of my experiences have been with startups and growing startups, and they haven't had like such solidified roles. Like, I've been a CFO, but it's kind of like ultimately you're there to fill gaps as well. And in thinking about my experience with Studio McGee, like I started, it's interesting. I interviewed for the CFO position 4 years ago. And said the timing just wasn't right, and he said, I want to go with somebody that's maybe a little bit more junior, and I said, okay, that's great. And I started a fractional CFO business, and I partnered with Amplio on it, and then he circled back with me a year later, and he said, like, I think we're ready for you, like, I want to bring you in. And I said, you really don't need a full-time CFO. And what consulting with Amplio taught me was that too often companies hire CFOs and they have them doing controller work, and they're not getting the value out of the CFO. And so, I think for a lot of the compliance functions, that's much more controller related. And then for more strategic stuff, it's more CFO related. And so I really like the strategic side of things. And so I always, if it was controller related, we'd bring in controllers, and then we'd get good information. Then we could actually start making decisions, and that for me was the more exciting stuff, the forward-looking stuff. And so I told Sid, I said, I think you only need me for maybe 10 hours a week, and let's start there, because I already had 10 other clients, and so we started there, but that 10 grew to 20 because I saw needs within the organization. Sid and Shay were filming for Netflix, and it was taking up a ton of time. A lot of the workforce at the time was really junior. There was kind of a leadership vacuum, and so Sid would just ask me, hey, could you do this? Could you do this? And so, just like looking for problems to solve, led me to go from a fractional CFO at 10 hours a week to 20 hours a week to, as a consultant, I had all the VPs reporting into me, and then transitioning into president. And he kept saying, when are you going to come on full time? I said, I still don't think you need a full-time CFO, but if you want to bring me on to run the businesses as president, I think that's exciting for me, and we could grow it. We could raise some private equity, and we talked about a vision together, and he loved it. And I said, but you're going to have to be okay with me making decisions. And he says, you understand the finances much better than I do. I'm good with you making decisions. And again, that's kind of the power of being on the finance side of things, is you have that trust that you're not going to get the company in financial trouble. And so I guess, in thinking about, coming here, I thought, what's helped me is always kind of looking for problems to solve. Even if it's outside of my lane, of course you don't want to, do other people's work and that kind of stuff, but always having an eye for where you could add value, even if it's not within your job description.
Yeah, one other point on your question, Reed. One other thing, that if you guys are private equity owned, you're probably doing quarterly board meetings or monthly, depends on how on hands your owners are. And I suspect you're doing risk and ops slides and if you don't go to your budget and then your risk and ops slide and kind of triangulate that and say, okay, here's a risk, here's an opportunity, that opportunity, how do I fund that? I got to look at my budget now and fund that opportunity, because that's a real possibility of increasing sales, getting new doors, new points of distribution, or whatever that is. Whatever's sitting on your risk and opportunity slide, if you're preparing those for a private equity partner, you should look at that and say, how do I unlock items in my budget for that? That's a suggestion. I do that all the time and look at that and go, oh, I can't really fund that. Is that real? The marketing guy said they can sell $5 million more on this shelf of, they can go get a new partner or whatever. Sometimes you have to fund those and see if you can't grow the business through those.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it's just all about being strategic, right? Because you don't want people coming in, and I hate it when people say, well, you guys are just bean counters. Like, I've never counted beans ever one time in my whole life. So we don't sit around and count beans. We help the organization succeed. And when you take approaches like that, then people say, oh, these guys are strategic. They're really trying to help us succeed. And that's a great way to do it.
Well, that's great. So perfect time. We're about halfway in. I was going to kind of reach out into the audience, but we've got a comment. Yes.
Yeah, Ryan King with Red Wallets, been the CFO there for a few years, and love the thought, but one that I struggle with is, because I've heard, you've got to embrace the CFO title, and I loved yours, and what was your name? Cotopaxi.
Gary. Yeah.
Is the CFO, but just thinking how I'm going to take aways from this is, where do you find the balance between being kind of the tether to the ground of just like, yeah, I love the CEOs, because what you said with Davis, where he's like, we need to hire this. Our CEO does the same thing, and I literally, your experience, I was like, oh my gosh, that resonates so much. But how do you be, okay, get context, try to understand the vision, versus also realizing that, hey, like, we have parameters and things that we need to, fit in. I guess just say yes, but not be a rubber stamp. That's kind of.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And then you probably have bank covenants you're trying to, stick with. So you have a line of credit, and there's all kinds of reasons you need to stick to your financial plan. But I think Nate said something early on. It's like about making sure you've got a strategic plan up front, right? So every year at Cotopaxi, we have a plan for the year. It gets board approved in December, and so we all know what the financial plan is for the year. And so I can always go back to that. I can always say, okay, we all agreed on this plan here, and if we do this thing, it's going to trim our EBITDA by this much, or we might go reduce spend over in this area over here, like what's more important. So you're actually not making the decision. You are saying, okay, here's all the information that we have. What do we think is best as a leadership team? If we say, okay, we'll just lop that off our EBITDA target for the year and we'll accept that, or we'll say, actually, let's delay some spending over here so we can go accomplish that. So I think if you don't have that plan up front, it makes it a lot harder, because then you're kind of always the one pulling it in. But if you do have a plan and everybody's signed off on it, that makes it a lot easier.
I think the other thing is, data is power. And oftentimes the accounting guys look at a P&L and they can look at 5 lines and say, oh, that's a great number, or that's a bad number, and they can know. You should go to your marketing partners with just a simple calculation or a simple, no, well,
Not because they're dumb,
no,
they're
not
super
that- no,
smart, right?
like-
Marketing
like
people are smart.
Our product
Yeah.
development team has 19 new items that they're looking to launch in the next 2 quarters. 19. The problem is if you don't have a margin calculation on every one of those products, they go to vendors and the vendors say, oh, that's $2 for the cost. So my marketing department is already committed to Walmart, hey, you can buy it for X. Well, guess what? We don't even have enough margin in that. They need to know that prior to having that discussion. It's the same with management. Back to Gary's point, if you have a strat plan and a budget, you can say, oh, that was in there, it's covered or not. That's a kind of an easy way to say no. The other way to do it is to provide enough details to say, that's a great idea, we're not charging enough, we don't have enough margin in that product. Let's launch that product if we can get that margin. What's the competitive set? Get enough data to be able to go back and have a pretty healthy conversation with whomever's asking for what they need and say, that's awesome, or wow, that's a really bad idea because economically it doesn't make sense. And kind of prove out in a pretty simple way that makes sense or not. I've found that's been powerful. Sometimes you lose. The CEO sometimes says something and you go do it. Sometimes.
Yeah, like, I know, when Davis wants to do something, pretty much just gotta find a way to do it, so we'll figure it out, but anyway.
Oh, great question, Ryan. Yes.
So I'm Justin Martin with Biotron, Talis, Aceto Group, and we've recently gone through a merger and an acquisition. So I appreciate what you had to say about inheriting a mess, trying to fix stuff. I guess my question would be, what counsel would you have for someone who's just going into that, going from finding a cash basis, trying to move to an accrual basis, finding messes in, the cost accounting system? What counsel would you have to someone who is going through that for the first time? Yes.
Yeah, steal people from Cotopaxi. No, seriously, I think you have to be really realistic about the people on your team and their competency. I think in a growing organization, you always have a lot of loyalty to people, and you give what you would call battlefield promotions because of that loyalty. But then you get to a phase, at least I found in the growth, where you realize that you really need to bring in outside talent to accomplish goals. And the sooner you come to that conclusion, the better. I joke with Gary about this because they run a very similar environment as we do. They have a Shopify front end, they run NetSuite, they have a Soligo Flow, they have Snap Fulfill in their WMS. And Rich actually had left Cotopaxi, so I didn't technically steal him from them, but I did steal their DevOps guys. So, but trying to find the right talent, people that have done it before always helps. I know early in my career, I'd always get frustrated because there'd be these job descriptions that said, like, you have to have done this, 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 and this. I'm like, well, I've never had an opportunity to do that. How do I get an opportunity? And so, sometimes people have that competency that that they have the potential to get there. But I think just being realistic about your team and the problem, because sometimes if problems persist, it can be really, really tough. Morale declines, and so you want to solve those problems as soon as you can.
Yeah, and I think if you can get some short-term wins, it really helps too. So, and by the way, Davis is an amazing guy. I don't know if any of you know him. He's amazing. What he does is, he's got amazing vision. He's such a cool guy. He's very genuine. So, when I started at Cotopaxi, Rich, of course, will remember this, but they were producing financials outside of NetSuite, which is the system that we used, and I started looking at those, and I'm like, I don't know where any of these numbers come from. I can't tie them back to anything. I still don't know how they were produced. And so when I came in, I just said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you what comes out of NetSuite right now, and I'll point out all the pitfalls, right, all the things that don't look right. And Rich was instrumental in making that happen because he'd been trying to get stuff done, but just for whatever reason, the company hadn't put a voice to the finance team yet. And so, anyway, speaking of having good people, like I was lucky that Rich was there because he was really good at NetSuite and he knew what was going on. He was a great ally. And then he let me push on him too. So like when I started, we weren't really closing the books at all, right? We didn't close. And so then we started closing like maybe by the end of the month. And then I said, hey, Rich, what's it going to take to close by, 5 business days? And he said, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, why can't you do that? And so we started walking through all the barriers and just being a partner and ally and working together. And then you start winning and people see you start winning and they're like, oh, let's keep doing this stuff. So I think, like we were doing manual checks. We just put bill.com in place. That was an easy win. So we didn't do that anymore. And then we were doing expense reports on Excel. So we just popped in Expensify. That was easy. Everybody loved it. You got some wins like that people thought, oh, they're really making stuff better. And it made finance teams' life better too.
What Gary said was super important. You've got to find one source of truth. If you've got a system, use it. If you don't know how to use it, I say figure it out, but it's easier said than done. Sometimes the systems don't work and maybe you haven't set it up correctly, but that's okay. Just work through the system. You've got to have one source of truth. I came to a company and the FP&A guy says, yeah, none of the financial reporting that comes out of the system is accurate. I'm like, okay. I hired a controller that is sitting in the back, and I said to Ian, the head of FP&A says none of the reports work, and in 2 days, he had a system report that matched the FP&A's reports, and found some errors. Hey, he's got snipers in there. He's got little numbers that somehow are hard-coded or whatever. And you've got to have one source of truth. Use your system, even if it's QuickBooks or even if it's kind of clunky, because you cannot have 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 sets of data.
Yeah, that's a big
You
deal.
both make a really good point. I see a lot of companies, they come in your exact spot, Justin, go, this is a disaster, we've got to blow it all up. I know Gary had to be tempted too when he walked into Cotopaxi, but both of your reaction though is bad numbers isn't necessarily an issue of, oh, my system's bad, I got to get a new one. A lot of times you just have to learn how to use what you have and take what you have and make it work and then make some incremental changes around the side. But it's so tempting to say, hey, we can throw a couple $100,000 at this and implement a new system and it's going to fix everything. You don't always have that luxury in people, time, or cash, but you can always take what you have and make it work and make the information that comes out of it usable so that you can get and start going down these other roads of a growth-minded CFO.
Well, and to that point, if you're not doing it right already, just going and getting a new system, you probably will just keep doing it wrong. You got to do it right before you go out and get new systems. That's so important.
Well, the tech stack upstairs would probably, I'm sure they've got a system to sell you, but. Patrick, what experience have you had in that space?
Oh.
In the system space?
Yeah.
Well, when I came in, we had just implemented NetSuite, and we weren't well served by our implementers, and it had gone totally sideways. And so it's been a lift to try to get it to where we're getting good intelligence. And I've gotten to a point where I understand our business model well enough intuitively, like where our gross profit margin should be, to know when I look at financial statements and I said, these aren't right. And I can, and what I love to do is look at, month by month percentage of income P&Ls, right? So you can see the trend analysis. And if you're seeing standard deviations like in your gross profit margin, that are more than what you would expect, depending on your product mix, you might have a little bit more noise in there, or lumpiness or whatever. But it's not getting right. So I think we've been investing a lot in this. I was thinking when Nate and Gary were talking and reflecting on my comment about having the right team, I think good consultants can make a world of impact, but not all consultants are treated equal, you know. So make sure that you get consultants that, you know, you can vet, you know, get referrals on them. It's taken us a while to get a really good team together to where I finally feel like, yes, we have a solution that we're progressing in the right direction. These people have done this before, and and so I guess that's our story.
Okay, got a comment in the middle?
Sure. Cole Dixon, go to Maxi. Curious about headcount in particular. It's hard to determine the ROI of headcount at times. What types of data do you look for to help just drive that decision-making process and balance the needs of all your teams?
I'm not answering that question because Cole already knows how we do that, so obviously for these guys.
You know, I actually, in the teams that aren't like support services teams, my marketing team, my product development team, the manufacturing's different. We just set up a new manufacturing facility. We just hired 300 people in Waco. They know what shifts they're running. That's a different story on an ROI because you've got a manufacturing variance and overhead and whatever. But the marketing people, what we do is we go back to the strat plan and say, hey, we're supposed to launch 12 new products next year. We're supposed to do it to these 5 retailers to get X number of PODs or points of distribution or shelving or whatever. Can you do it with 5 people? Can you do it with 6 people? You now have 8 in your team. Can you do it with all these people? Do you need all of these people to do that? And so what we do is we look at the activity and then the head count that's supporting that activity. And I am kind of not a jerk, but I do say, do we need everybody? And the reason why I want to do that is it's a little like price inflation. You know, prices do go down. Headcount can go down if it's not the right headcount. And so I ask that question usually to my senior leadership, do we have the right headcount? It's not saying that we should let people go, but again, we match it to our strat plan and our product launch plan and everything else.
Yeah, I think for us, I'm not really tracking metrics per se on that, but I like what Nate said relative to understanding what are your supportive functions versus what are some of your more revenue producing functions. And I know when I'm evaluating headcount, so we always get an improved headcount at the start of the year. This year was a little different. Our forecasts were off. I think this has been a tough year for a lot of people in business, and so we cut back on our projected headcount. But I was very conscious of knowing, like, okay, if I don't give marketing, you know, a hire that they really need, if I don't give our product dev, if I don't give our merchandising, if I don't give our visual styling the headcount they need, we're going to be behind 2 years out than where we thought we'd be on our 5-year plan. And so I try to really accommodate those requests and really try to understand it from a value analysis perspective, because a lot of times those positions in more the revenue producing side of things, they're going to pay for themselves. The question is, how long is it going to take? And do you have the cash now to support that? And then on the supportive side, our operations, our accounting, our people side, our tech side, I try to, do as much as we can with as little, but I'm always asking our department heads, like, okay, if we go without this, what's going to happen? And so, like, operations, for example, say, like, okay, if we don't have QC people, then we're going to receive goods that might not be good quality, and so we're going to, okay, well, that's a hire that I need to approve because we're going to save money, right? If we don't have the receiving people on the docks, then our receipts, we're going to have to reschedule, we're going to pay rescheduling. So there's all that kind of analysis, so sometimes you spend money to make money type thing, yeah, I think every business that I've worked in has been a little different in that regard. But when you're growing a business, I think for me, a lot of times it's been kind of intuitive, where I know we need to spend there, I know we maybe can not do so much there. And I've tried to encourage, from a cultural perspective, one thing I've tried to do is encourage this notion that we want to stretch you as team members. And what does that look like? If people are feeling overwhelmed, they're having too much work and they're not supported. But I think most people really enjoy coming into work being challenged. And so if they're challenged and supported, that's really good. And so sometimes you might go into a department and say, all my people are overworked. Well, maybe they're not doing exciting work. Maybe there's a way to reframe, what they're doing and show, how, they might have a growth opportunity there, understand where their goals are at, where they want to get to. If they have a vision that can help them get through it, the monotony or whatever it might be. But it seems like a lot of the supportive functions are always talking about maybe being overworked, but maybe there's a way to reframe that.
Yeah, and I will add one thing too, is that it's really important to go get like industry benchmarks for how much in your industry do you spend as a percent of revenue on marketing, on distribution, on product development, so you have that framework. And then like goals like revenue per employee. So every industry will have kind of a benchmark, like how much revenue should you be generating by employee. So like if it's, I'm making this up, but if it's $1 million per employee of revenue, then you kind of look at where are we, and then you can say, all right, how do we drive towards that? And does that metric make sense for us? You might say, actually, we should be higher than that, or you might say we should be a little below that, depending on the margins of your business, for example. But having benchmarks by industry, it goes back to Nate's point, like data's power. If you have data and facts that you're operating off of, then it's not a battle, right, between finance and the rest of the organization.
Okay. We're short on time. We could go on for this. I feel like we're just barely getting going, but really appreciate your insights, appreciate the questions. I really have seen with Gary and Patrick and Nate a proven ability to adapt the companies and businesses and environments around them to be what they need to be and not just kind of get stuck in what currently is. And maybe as just kind of a parting shot, if I could ask each of you to just share kind of a piece of advice for the CFOs in the room, a lot of them up and coming, that you found or learned over the course of your career that's helped you to be able to do that, to kind of see what needs to be and to adapt and change the company or business and hearts and minds of the people around you to do that. And maybe start with Nate and come this way.
Yeah, I would suggest one thing, and that is if you don't have a goal, personal goal to learn something new each year, that's not, maybe it could be in your job or it couldn't be in your job. Last year, my biggest was trying to understand social media ROI calculations. The year before, it was actually to understand common debt ratio calculations. The year before that, it was actually to learn Excel better, even though I feel like I know it. Every year I have a goal and I kind of say, okay, it may not be CPE, but I'm going to learn something. And it might be marketing, it might be ops, it might be, hey, everyone says they're a lean black belt, whatever. What is that? What really is that? How does it affect your organization? So anyway, just choose one thing to personally learn.
That's great. Yeah, I would think of maybe look at your current job description and first of all, nail that. Do that really well. And then think, where do I want to expand and what opportunities within my organization would allow me to expand? And work with your, if you're a CFO, maybe you're reporting into the CEO, and work with them to gain opportunities that will stretch you in different directions. Each of you probably have different ambitions regarding, what you want to do. Maybe you want to be a CFO of a really big company. For me, I've always looked at finance as a path to management because I love the diversity of, managing people and the strategy and ops and all this kind of stuff. And so I've really enjoyed that. And so I've always kind of tried to nail, the job description first, and then find things that I could take off of the CEO's plate and just say, okay, help me understand, like, where are your biggest pain points? Can I solve that for you? Why don't you put that on my plate? Like, why don't I have operations report into me? Like, you're really busy. Let's see how that goes. And then to kind of prove your competency. It's amazing. as you adopt that mindset of kind of running towards problems, pretty soon, you know, you've got a lot of problems to solve, but you've progressed and you're increasing competencies in that way, and that allows you to grow as a person and, you know, maybe get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and I just echo what these guys are saying. Just be willing to learn and grow and adapt. I think if you're willing to do those things, you'll always be able to adjust and find a path and help the organization to succeed. Where I see people fail is they just want to do things a certain way, and if it's not their way, then they start failing because they can't adjust and adapt to the circumstances that are around them. And just be willing to learn and work with all different kinds of personalities, and you know, don't take yourself too seriously. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, really appreciate your insights and your time. I feel like it was time well spent, and just a big round of applause for our three panelists.